Hello Blitz fans of all ages, it's me PlumCastle, and in today's video I'm going to give you an in-depth overview of how you can take your rating from where it currently is all the way up to Diamond and potentially even beyond depending on how dedicated you are. Now I'm going to be going through kind of this little list that I put together, and these concepts will range from pretty simple ones all the way up to fairly complex ones. So no matter where you are when it comes to ratings, there will hopefully be something here that will benefit you in some way. And without any further ado, we're going to get right into it. So the first thing I need to do is, if you're new, to explain ratings. Now, if you already know what ratings is and how it works, you can skip ahead a minute or two. But basically, what ratings is unlike normal modes, you're going to be pitted against teammates and alongside. You're going to be put with and against teammates that are of a similar skill level to what you currently are. And the way that it does that is through this rating system. Now, real quick, if you've ever played FPS titles, you might already kind of know where I'm going with this. But basically, there is a season. In this case, I think the most recent one's like 4 months. At the start of the season, you will play 10 what they call calibration matches. Once you play those, it'll kind of determine how well you did and give you a rating. And they can vary from bronze. I've seen up to platinum, like actually calibrating into platinum. I don't know that diamond is actually possible, but either way, you're going to be placed somewhere in that spectrum. And basically, once you do that, you can then continue to change how your rating is, because it's all based by points. Each one has a different set of thousand, like diamond is 5,000 plus, platinum is 4,000 plus, and so on and so forth. Here's a little image just to illustrate that. And so what you do after you've calibrated is every time you play another rating battle, you will either gain or lose points. And there are two ways to do each. To gain points, it's pretty simple. If you are on the winning team, you gain points. And as well, this is very important to note, if you are the best performer even on the losing team, you will also gain points. Now, I do believe this is XP based, so there may be a little bit of some funny ones in there where you see the guy that had like 500 less damage, then you end up getting the points because technically he got more XP. And then, of course, the way you lose points is naturally losing in a game and not doing the best. As well, there's also this other one that I do need to note. You can lose points on the winning team if you AFK and do nothing. Wargaming does not encourage that. So AFK farming, it's not possible even if you somehow manage to win. And then, of course, the reason that you would play ratings to begin with would be the rewards, but I'll go into those a little bit later as I want to go ahead and get into the tutorial. And so with that said, starting the actual tutorial here, it's that you don't want to jump into ratings too quick, especially if you are a new player. I did this, and I can say from personal experience, it was not terribly fun, because in order to be able to play ratings, you need to get a tier 7 tank or higher to 100% crew. However, if it is your very first tier 7 that you've been able to do that on, chances are, unless it's a reroll account, you probably don't have enough experience in the game to be able to jump right into ratings. Some people may. There are, of course, those individuals, but I know I certainly was not one of them. I went into ratings pretty much as soon as I could, and no pun intended, I tanked. So you don't want to jump in too quick. Personally, tier 7 is also not my favorite tier for this. Some people can do it. Overall, across the board, tier 8 is definitely where it's at when it comes to this particular mode. And so I would personally suggest that you get 3 tech tree tier 8s before you really try to do ratings, because by then you've probably played a few thousand battles, and if you're really dedicated, you can learn this game very quickly. And it will, all in all, probably just be much better if you do that. So now comes the important part. Which tank do you pick? Well, really, it's going to depend on you as the player and what tank you personally perform the best in. There are some like obvious ones that you may have heard, like the T-77, the T-54E2, preferably with the shark camouflage because it looks cool, and the Action 10. Those are, like, for me at least, would be probably the big 3, at least on the premium side. And then on the tech tree, you've got things like the ML1, potentially things like maybe the Tiger, or I believe there's like a few TVPs. There's some pretty solid tanks in the tech tree, especially when it comes to the heavy side, because that's kind of where it's at when it comes to this mode. In fact, no joke, there will be times that it will literally be 6 heavies versus 6 heavies, and then each team will have like a tank destroyer or a medium. It is a very heavy based mode, so generally that's probably what you're going to want to go with. And then moving on though, when you are finally ready to jump into ratings and you play those 10 calibration battles, I will say don't feel discouraged if you don't get a good rating right off the bat. I know for me, I think my first rating was probably a silver or something. I've been pretty much everywhere in the rating spectrum with maybe the exception of bronze, because I don't recall having gotten there, but I've been everywhere, so it's totally normal to play ratings for the first time and get something like a bronze or a silver or even a gold. It's totally normal, so don't feel discouraged by it. It just means you'll probably need to practice a bit more, but I'm sure that you can get there. And then the next thing is practice makes perfect. Now, of course, I mean, ratings is still Blitz, so naturally the better you are at the game, the easier ratings is going to be. So to try to explain every little niche thing would take me hours upon hours, which is why there's so many tutorials up there on YouTube. But just generally learning the game, the core features of the game, like spotting, how to deal damage effectively, those sorts of things. There are plenty of tutorials. I've even done a few of them, but they are definitely going to help you, especially watching tutorials. For me, growing in Blitz and being able to become a better player was definitely sped up by being able to watch YouTube videos and tutorials and learn super quick that way. The next thing is to work with your team. Now this one may or may not be a popular one. A lot of people do complain about their teams, myself included sometimes, but the more you can work with your team, the better it is. Now I totally get it. There are sometimes teams that will just go off the deep end and you're kind of left to sitting duck. In that case, what I'm going to say is just do the best you can, for the reason because if you do the best on your team, you will still get the points even if you lose. But just the more you can work with your team so much as they will let you, the better it's going to be. The other day I played a game and pretty much my entire team decided that we were all kind of going to do the same thing, which was perfect. It was super rare, but it actually worked, and I do believe we actually won that game. So the more you can work with your team, the better. And the next thing is understanding the specifics of ratings. Now, this is a little bit more specific and a little bit higher level. Understanding the specifics of rating is realizing that this is not normal modes. Again, you're being pitted against and with people that are of a similar skill level. So naturally, it is going to be harder to rank up, so to speak. You're probably not going to see things like a 65% win rate like you might if you are a really good player in random battles. It's just probably not going to happen. It can happen, but it's probably not going to. And there are some specific things to do with ratings. So, for example, if you know who, say, the top 1,000 players are, or maybe you don't know who they are, but you can kind of guess who's in that Diamond League, or more specifically, being able to determine who are in that top, like, 30 players, you'll eventually start to realize that you'll probably get quite a few games with them. And so recognizing those specific names can kind of help you how to play. It's a really specific thing that is definitely something at a bit of a higher level, but you can actually do it kind of somewhere in the intermediate level as well. If you see somebody that has an avatar that they can only have if they were in Diamond at one point, chances are they're probably a pretty decent player and you want to be careful around them. Camouflages, same thing. And backgrounds, and I'm just going to break here. The rewards here are backgrounds, camos, and there's a few other things. You can even get a tank. I'll show an image of the different things that you can get. But yeah, these different items can help you determine who's what and who's generally of what skill level and how to play the game. Again, very specific. I don't use this all the time. It is just another method that you can use. And then, of course, as you start to develop these skills, you will begin to climb the ranks. And honestly, after a little while, you'll probably start to see calibrating into gold a bit more often, maybe even getting your way up into platinum, and maybe even calibrating into platinum. And then eventually, as time goes on, you can get to diamond. It would be a lie for me to tell you that you're probably going to get diamond super quickly. To be honest, it took me, I want to say, at least 1,000 battles in ratings alone across different seasons to actually get to diamond. And now, granted, overall on my account, I probably had about 5,000 battles, so it's not too bad, but it's not an instant success. And each person's going to be different. You may get it a little bit faster than I did. You may get it a little bit slower than I did. It's just a player-specific thing. But given enough time and dedication, you should be able to climb the ranks without too much issue. The next thing is you only need to be better than your team. Now, I've kind of touched on this already, but really, your focus shouldn't be so much on your team other than helping them, as I mentioned. But when it comes to personal skill, you just need to do as well as you possibly can, and that's really all you can do, because the better you do, the higher the chances that you will end up being that person on the losing team that does actually get the points despite the loss. So just being the best player you can is going to go a long way, not worrying about, oh, are my teammates going to do well this game or not. Wargaming's really made this nice. It kind of is dependent on you whether you go higher in the ranks or not, and I do really like this system. I win and lose plenty of games and ratings, and being able to gain those points in some of the losses is definitely really nice. So really just focus on improving yourself and not worrying about what your team is or isn't doing, aside from trying to work with them, if that makes sense. And the next thing is, and this is really, really niche, but it's when to play, because ratings, I have found, is a very tricky one. When you get into higher ranks and stuff, you're kind of doomed to be going against pretty good players. But there is, I've noticed, depending on where you are, different times of day that can be better. I personally play all the time now because I've gotten to the point where I can sort of comfortably do it. But I know for a time I would generally try to play before the evening when, because primarily this game I think is probably high school and college students. So they've got school at some point in the day. So they, especially on like the Pacific Coast, they're probably not getting on the game until like 7 or so, 6 or 7 if you're on Eastern time. So if you're on Eastern time, this is one of the lucky things for you, because Eastern time is one of the few time zones that actually gets this advantage. Because if you are in school, for example, you get off school before the Pacific Coast does, so there are fewer people that are going to be good to compete with. There'll still be some good players, but generally you aren't going to have to deal with all of them at once. Again, super niche. It's going to depend on where you are in the world and what your time zone is, but generally speaking, that is one way to do it. And now the next thing is climbing to the top. And of course, we're talking about going beyond Diamond at this point. Let's say you've already gotten Diamond. Maybe you've gotten Diamond a few times and you want to go up. I have, for example, been in the top 30 before, which is why I was able to get, the Lorraine Fearless. I will say, it's not as intimidating as it might seem, but it is not a piece of cake. It is a long grind, and it is super easy to get burned out both during that grind and especially afterward. Generally speaking, when I think I've only done this once, maybe twice, where I got into the top 30, and that is a difficult grind. And generally speaking, after I did it, the next season, I would be burned out and I wouldn't play ratings for several months. So if you're going to go down that road, keep in mind, it could be very challenging. I'm not discouraging you from it. I think you could probably hit it. It's just, how dedicated are you to it to actually get to that point? Because in order to be in the top 30, at least from my personal experience, you have to play pretty decently. Of course, you have to be in Diamond. And generally speaking, you probably want to be playing every single day, preferably about 8 games, unless you're just losing and then maybe back off a little bit on those. But yeah, it is a long grind if you want to get into that top 30 to get more parts for the specific tank. Right now, it's the T49 Fearless, and the very reason I'm making this video is partly to update an old one, and as well, New Year's is coming, as is the next season from what I know. And then moving on from there, though, is that tilt will cripple you. Now, this is kind of tied in with climbing to the top, because, and you may have heard this term before, especially if you're into like FPS titles as well as World of Tanks Blitz, and that is this concept of tilt. Basically, when things don't go well, even if you're a pretty easygoing person, if you get even a little bit frustrated, even internally, it starts to throw off how you do it. They've done studies on this. It's actually kind of funny. Being angry at a game will just, without fail, make you worse at it. And I can speak from personal experience. I'm a little bit too prone to tilt, probably. And I've gotten my fair dose of it, and I can say that, yes, for sure, tilt is going to absolutely cripple you. You won't think it's you necessarily during tilt, I mean. But, like, if you look at your games afterward, you'll be like, ooh, yeah, that wasn't so great on my end. So, yeah, tilt will, for me, it affects my accuracy the most because I rush shots a little bit too much. I get a little bit too confident, weirdly enough. So, yeah, tilt is not a good thing. Don't get overly frustrated with the game. At the end of the day, it is just a game. You may or may not hit the rank goal that you had, but that's okay. Wargaming does have different seasons, so you can continue to try to climb and improve. And as best as you can, just be kind of chill about it, realizing your teams will do some really weird stuff sometimes, and then sometimes you'll goof, and that's okay. Again, I really do like the fact that the top player in the losing team can get points. I think that really helps to alleviate some of the tilt, because if, for example, your team is just crashing and burning, maybe even you included, you don't necessarily have to feel upset so much because there's still a potential possibility you gain points anyway. So there's nothing really to get frustrated about yet anyway, and that is really probably the biggest thing that I would praise Wargaming for having put that system in. I think that was a very, very good move. And then to kind of sum all this up is that you don't need good stats to get to Diamond and potentially even beyond. I've seen plenty of people with 40% stats get there, so it's not so much stat dependent. Now, don't get me wrong, stats can definitely help, but they aren't going to be what's going to carry you to the end, or at least not what's on paper. You could have an account that maybe has a 45% win rate, so you might think that you're probably not a good player, but there are some players that are 45% and they are good and they just don't get lucky with their teams. That is entirely possible, or maybe somebody who is younger and has come back to the game. So if your stats aren't what you would like them to be, or aren't what you think they should be, don't worry about that so much. Just keep playing. What you are currently doing is ultimately going to decide where you're going to end up going. If you're doing good now, it doesn't matter what your stats are, or even if you don't do super fantastic, as long as you are pretty consistent and, of course, dedicated. I would say just about anyone could get to the Diamond rating. But anyway, that does conclude the main part of this. I'm just going to go kind of real quick summarize. Basically, especially when you're starting, you don't want to get discouraged. You don't want to go in too quick per se, and a lot of it's just going to come down to personal improvement and getting into the mindset of playing ratings. But anyway, that does conclude the video, and so with that, I hope you all enjoyed, and as always, have fun, good luck, and happy tanking.